Hi, everyone, and welcome to the National Press Theater. I know people are still filing in, but given the time constraints, I'm just hoping to get this started as quickly as possible. My name is Rachel Haynes. I'll be moderating today's press conference. Just a few health and safety measures that we include here in the National Press Theater. If you're not using your earpiece, to please place it in front of you. There's a sticker there to help protect the health and safety of our interpreters. I understand we have a number of speakers today. I would just like to issue a gentle reminder that we would like to keep our remarks to 15 minutes, and that way we can have as much time as possible for all of the questions. So with that, I will hand it over to the minister. Following the remarks, we'll go to any questions that we have in the room. If time allows, we'll be able to go to Zoom. So thank you, Minister.
Bonjour à tous. Je tiens d'abord à reconnaître que nous nous trouvons sur le territoire non cédé du peuple algonquin Anishinaabe. Je m'appelle Rachel Bendayan, je suis la fière députée d'Outremont et également la secrétaire parlementaire du premier ministre Marc. Et à ce titre, je tiens à souligner à quel point les enjeux dont nous discutons aujourd'hui sont importants pour le premier ministre et que les questions de sécurité et de protection de nos enfants lui tiennent particulièrement à cœur. As many of you know, I've been working on this issue of safe social media for well over a year, both in a very public-facing way, but also behind the scenes. And throughout that time, I've had the opportunity to meet with parents, teachers, brain health researchers, youth advocates, and technology companies, organizations such as Unplugged Canada, Skills Before Screens, RAD, Phone Free Schools Movement, many others. We've also learned a lot as a government from other like-minded governments and experts abroad, including in jurisdictions that have already taken steps to address this very issue. What we've heard is that technology brings, of course, enormous opportunities, but that the status quo is untenable. As a mother, and I know there are many parents up here, this issue is deeply personal. Protecting children online is not a partisan issue, of course. It's a responsibility that we all share. And there's already a growing consensus in Canada that legislators, platforms, families all have a role to play. At its core, this is about the kind of world we want our kids to grow up in. Mieux protéger nos enfants, exiger davantage de responsabilités de la part des grandes plateformes et bâtir un environnement numérique plus sûr pour tous les Canadiens sont des priorités pour notre gouvernement et aujourd'hui, nous franchissons une étape importante en ce sens. Parce qu'au fond, il ne s'agit pas seulement de technologie, il s'agit du monde dans lequel nous voulons voir grandir nos enfants. Un monde où l'innovation demeure au service des gens et où la sécurité de nos jeunes n'est jamais considérée comme le prix à payer pour le progrès. Nous sommes convaincus qu'il est possible de trouver ce juste équilibre, mais pour y parvenir, nous avons le devoir d'agir. Et lorsque la santé de nos enfants est en jeu, l'inaction n'est pas une option. Et pour nous en dire plus, je suis heureuse de céder la parole à une pédiatre renommée. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Moore Hepburn from SickKids.
Thank you so much. My name is Dr. Charlotte Moore Hepburn. I've been a practicing pediatrician for the last 20 years and have the pleasure of serving as the director of the Child Health Policy Accelerator at the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto. We all know that the lives of our children and young people have been profoundly reshaped by the introduction of digital platforms and services. These technologies influence every aspect of their lives, how they learn and play, how they socialize, and fundamentally understand the world around them. And while there are some benefits to these platforms, the rapid integration of social media and AI into their everyday life has outpaced the protections needed to keep them safe. Said another way, young people's engagement with the online world is the largest fully unregulated clinical trial affecting human development in the history of human civilization. Canadian parents and families want action and meaningful accountability. Today's announcement is an important response to their very serious concerns. In outpatient settings, in emergency departments, and inpatient units, pediatricians like me have been treating young people for anxiety, depression, self-harm, disordered eating at alarmingly increasing rates. These harms are not only driven by the content that children and youth encounter online, they are also linked to the very design of these digital platforms that captivate and profit from their attention. We must safeguard the very precious and uniquely vulnerable developmental window that is childhood and adolescence. Canada needs this comprehensive framework that establishes clear responsibilities for platforms to act safely and responsibly in both the building and operating of the products they provide. Now, history has proven that this requires strong government oversight. and an independent commission with the authority, expertise, and resources to monitor and enforce compliance is essential to ensuring that legislative protections are actually meaningful in practice. The health and development of an entire generation of young people depends on the decisions that we make about this now, today, and our seriousness of our commitment to getting this right moving forward. Thank you.
Je pense que c'est moi. Parce que là, le micro, ouais. Sorry. Is it on? Yeah, good. Okay, sorry. Bonjour tout le monde. I'm Anna Gainey, Secretary of State for Children and Youth and Member of Parliament for NDG Westmount. Je suis contente d'être avec vous aujourd'hui. Our government clearly has a mandate and a duty both to protect all Canadians and especially children. The digital world connects us, educates us, and drives our economy. But it has also become a space where too many children are increasingly exposed to harmful content, harmful behavior, and harmful images. We cannot postpone taking action to protect them. Au cours de cette année, j'ai rencontré des pédiatres, des enseignants, des chercheurs, des parents et des jeunes eux-mêmes. Leur message a été clair et urgent. Les autorités de santé publique sont unies sur le fait que les réseaux sociaux ne sont pas suffisamment sécuritaires pour les jeunes et qu'il faut agir pour réduire ces risques. Children are being cyberbullied, exploited, and targeted with no consistent safeguards or accountability. The harms are real, they are intensifying, and they are happening to children across this country. I'm also here as a parent of 3, and like so many moms and dads across this country, I have raised my kids in a digital world that moves sometimes faster than many of us parents feel we can actually keep up with. And I know very personally the stress and worry that underpins conversations about how to use your phone, which apps, screen time limits, boundaries, group chats, and all of these types of things. So I'm particularly proud to be here today and be part of a government delivering on this commitment to protect our kids online. Our laws were drafted in a pre-digital era. They focus more on punishment and place almost no obligation on platforms to prevent harm. And that changes today. Les plateformes en ligne doivent être plus sécuritaires pour les enfants et sans plan d'action, les réseaux sociaux maintiennent nos jeunes dans un milieu toxique. Et c'est là l'objet de cette loi. Before I hand things over, I want to recognize the parents, the advocates, and the organizations who have fought for this, some of whom are sitting up here with us today. You showed up and shared your stories. You walked into offices like mine and told us what was happening to kids. And I want you to know that we hear you. I'm proud to be here today alongside my colleague, Minister Miller. His leadership has been instrumental in getting us here today. Merci beaucoup. Thank you.
Bonjour tout le monde. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Anne and Rachel, Dr. Hepburn. Il y a quelques semaines, justement, à SickKids, à Toronto, un médecin me disait qu'une jeune venait d'être admise aux soins intensifs dans un état catatonique. Catatonique. Après avoir été victime, elle, de cyberintimidation. Ses soi-disant amis avaient créé un site web uniquement pour se moquer d'elle. Et le résultat était son état dans un hôpital. Un jeune sur 4, âgé de 12 à 17 ans, dit avoir été victime de cyberintimidation au pays. Et selon le Centre canadien de protection de l'enfance, 52% des ados ont reçu des images sexuelles non désirées en ligne. 44% ont subi des pressions pour envoyer des images intimes. In 2023, there were 19,000 incidents of online child sex exploitation in Canada, which is a 500% increase in a few short years. Reports also show that online luring of children is on the rise. As a result of all this, kids exposed to this have a 4 times higher incidence of ideation and suicidal thoughts. And we've seen the tragic consequences of online harm both around the world and here in Canada, notably at Tumbler Ridge. And the numbers you're hearing, and you'll hear more from our colleagues, are bone-chilling. Behind every one of these stats is a child, a family, and a life. Au cours des derniers mois, j'ai rencontré des parents, des enfants, des médecins et des experts. Et partout, j'ai entendu la même question. Comment mieux protéger nos enfants des dangers en ligne? Comme société, nous devons agir. Comme parents, médecins, familles, gouvernements, nous avons tous la responsabilité de protéger nos enfants. Mais devons être honnêtes. Nous sommes, le Canada est en retard. Nos lois n'ont pas suivi l'ère numérique. Nous avons des outils pour agir au niveau criminel, civil, après qu'un préjudice a été subi, causé. Mais devons en faire plus pour prévenir ceci avant qu'il ne survienne. We have tons of tools, even more, thanks to recent changes to the criminal code, to prosecute the harm once it's occurred, to sue people, but the damage is done. This is unacceptable. We're failing our children. Enough is enough. Our parents cannot face these challenges alone, and the safety of children can't be an afterthought. We need basic protection in place so every child in this country can be safe on platforms they use every day. This is why we are introducing the Safe Social Media Act. The Act will establish a minimum age of 16 to have a social media account. The Act will require social media platforms and AI chatbot services to do more to protect children and make their platforms safe by design. Social media and AI chat platforms will have a responsibility to protect children from harmful content, including content that promotes self-harm, sexual exploitation, violence, hatred, bullying, or the non-consensual sharing of intimate images. Social media services will have to remove, within 24 hours, content that sexually victimizes a child or shares intimate content without consent, including sexually explicit deepfakes. And AI chatbot services will be required to mitigate the risk of chatbot communicating harmful content that have clear protocols in place when a user expresses an intention to harm themselves or others. They too will have to be safe by design. Platforms will have to be transparent and accountable to Canadians and submit publicly disclosed digital safety plans to the Digital Safety Commission. The measures in this bill represent, in my view, the basic expectation that parents and Canadians for keeping their kids safe online. I believe all parties should agree on the importance of these minimum safeguards. C'est la base d'une conversation nationale, une conversation qui a déjà eu lieu ailleurs au monde. Parce que les préjudices en ligne ne s'arrêtent pas aux frontières. Nous devons travailler ensemble, au-delà des partis et des gouvernements, sur cette question urgente. Et nous le devons à nos enfants. Je suis impatient de prendre vos questions, mais nous avons d'autres interventions, nos partenaires, notamment la CME, à qui je passe la parole.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm speaking on behalf of Canada Physicians in support of the Safe Social Media Act. For too long, tech and social media companies have profited off the attention of our children without any guardrails. I'm speaking both as a physician who sees dozens of kids every single day in my practice and also as a father to two young girls. It's totally unacceptable that the profit comes at the expense of our children's mental health, safety, and overall well-being. Every day, doctors see online how harms can hurt their children and their families. Everything from self-image issues to cyberbullying and self-harm and exposure to sexualized and harmful content. Time is up. We've seen enough. Platforms must be designed with safety as a key priority. They must limit exposure to harmful content, and they must take responsibility for the enormous impact that they're having. The Canadian Medical Association supports this bill and urges all parties to move swiftly to protect young people. Thank you. Merci. Eshe Miigwech.
Great. That's great.
Good afternoon, everyone. I start by saying that this is absolutely a historic day for the protection of Canadian children. Our organization has been on the front lines every single day. And every single day we bear witness to the injury and the harm of not only what is happening to Canadian children in this country, but also childhood in general. Every single year, we receive approximately 30,000 reports that come into cybertip.ca, Canada's tip line. We take reports on 8 different crime types that occur against children. We have also seen, since 2020, a 300% increase in online luring of children. We have kids as young as 10, 11 years old coming into us in crisis. We have families that are unraveling, that don't know how to protect their children. And it's not because parents are failing, it's because they are outmatched. And so what we understand is we've had a deliberate manufacturing of online spaces that put profit over and above safety. And at the same time, we are putting children in spaces equally that we would expect adults to be within. Our organization also issues between 10 to 20,000 removal notices a day of child sexual abuse material around the internet. This is one organization receiving this volume, receiving these notices. I think we cannot even appreciate the scale. And finally, I'm going to close on something just to add to the excellent points of everybody here. When we talk about tech responsibility and letting them off the hook, this is not their priority. When back in 2013, on financial sextortion reports coming into our organization, we received 40. Fast forward 10 years later to 2023, 4,762. What I close with is that these are not numbers. We keep track of lives of children that have been lost in Canada and around the world, children who have taken their lives because they cannot compete with organized crime networks having access to our children in Canadian homes. So today we applaud the move that we're not going to let perfect get in the way of good. Canada has signaled, along with the other G7 and other countries around the world, that we have to catch up when we're looking at online crimes against citizens in Canada and particularly against Canadian children. And today is a day that we've done it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. We'll now pass to our question and answer period. Reporters, please stick to one question and one follow-up so that we can get to as many people as possible. And I would ask the same to our speakers again, if you can keep your remarks as concise as possible so that we can get to as many reporters as we have in the room. So to start off, we'll go with Andréane Apablaza from Radio Canada.
Bonjour, la question est pour Monsieur Miller. Pourquoi ne pas interdire les agents conversationnels aux moins de 16 ans, surtout à la lumière de ce qui s'est produit à Tumbler Ridge?
Une très bonne question. De un, cette loi comporte cette nouveauté de s'assurer que les robots conversationnels ou les chatbots, peu importe l'expression qu'on utilise, soient sécuritaires dès leur conception. C'est une avancée importante qu'on n'aurait pas fait présumément si on avait introduit cette loi il y a 1 an. C'est important parce qu'on a tous vu ce qui est arrivé à Tumbler Ridge et à d'autres juridictions qui n'ont pas touché à ça pour l'instant. Il faut admettre quand même que les chatbots ne sont pas aussi étudiés que les méfaits et les préjudices qui sont subis par les plateformes en ligne et n'ont pas nécessairement le même rôle social que jouent les plateformes et les réseaux dits sociaux. Donc, on sait très bien que ces plateformes, que ces chatbots peuvent eux-mêmes être sécuritaires dès leur conception, soit sujets à un devoir de responsabilité, un devoir de protéger les enfants et un devoir d'enlever du matériel, notamment sexuel, c'est important, c'est une avancée, mais en ce qui a trait au moratoire en tant que tel, on ne pensait pas que c'était juste pour l'instant de le faire. Donc, c'est exclu de la loi.
Et pouvez-vous expliquer comment les exemptions vont fonctionner pour les réseaux sociaux qui respectent les règles?
Oui. D'un, il y a la mise en place d'une commission qui devrait être complètement prête dans 18 mois. C'est un échéancier assez agressif. Ça va être fait en coup de phase, mais les plateformes vont devoir parler au commissaire qui sera mis en place pour avoir des exemptions et prouver que leur plateforme soit sécuritaire. Je comprends qu'il y a un délai. Je l'ai dit dans mon discours qu'il y a du rattrapage à faire au Canada, mais étant donné que plusieurs plateformes ont opéré avec impunité pendant assez longtemps, merci, ils vont nous excuser qu'on va prendre un certain temps pour mettre en place une commission pour gérer cette relation. Mais c'est une relation qui est très importante parce qu'on parle de la mise en œuvre, mais aussi de l'application d'une loi qui est très importante pour prévenir justement les préjudices que les enfants subissent.
Okay. Thank you. We'll go to Laura Osman from The Logic.
Hey there, thanks for taking our questions. If I'm reading correctly, the maximum fine for a violation is something like 3% of the company's global revenues. How would the regulator be able to recover fines of that size, which could be very, very substantial?
It'll depend on the severity of the infraction and the compliance or non-compliance that occurs, Laura, as you mentioned. But and I suspect you're referring to platforms that wouldn't have assets in Canada that could be immediately seized, but there are plenty of relationships that we have, legal relationships that we have with other countries to enforce jurisdiction and judgment. So obviously, there'll probably be a legal process, but they are significant fines because, as you mentioned, some of these companies have very significant turnover. But that's the seriousness of the law.
Given the size of the maximum fine and the reaction from Washington to previous attempts to regulate internet companies that operate in Canada but are based in the U.S., was that a consideration at all in terms of drafting this bill and the kind of fines or kind of punishments you can impose on these platforms?
The most important consideration was to protect kids, Laura, first and foremost, Canadian kids. The reality is we have discussed with a lot of these platforms what this law would look like. The reactions, to be quite frank, have been anywhere ranging from, frankly, cautiously optimistic to neutral. Wait and see, obviously, until they inspect the content of the legislation, just like MPs are doing currently. I'd say there's a distinction between large platforms feeling they are being taxed or feeling that revenues are going to third parties that they don't control, perhaps distributing money to competitors, and making sure there's a standard for protecting kids. I'm not going to presume that the administration in the U.S. doesn't want to protect kids. And in fact, we see many acts in Congress that are starting to mirror in a piecemeal fashion some of the most important parts of this bill, which is first and foremost to remove material, but also to prevent the harms from happening in the first place. Thanks.
Thank you. Marie Vastel from Le Devoir.
Oui, Monsieur Miller, je pense que je vais continuer là-dessus. Vous dites que vous avez discuté avec certaines des plateformes. Est-ce que vous avez eu une indication à savoir si elles comptent collaborer? Parce que dans certains cas, je comprends qu'ils sont différents, mais dans certains cas, il y a eu une hésitation à changer leurs pratiques, à changer leurs algorithmes, une volonté avant tout de profit et donc d'un produit qui est par définition addictif. Est-ce que vous avez eu des échanges et avez-vous l'impression que ça pourrait fonctionner?
Ben, je pense qu'ils doivent, oui. C'est beau d'imposer des amendes, mais d'abord et avant tout, on veut que les gens respectent la loi. Et c'est ça l'importance d'une commission, d'un dialogue avec le gouvernement. On peut ne pas être d'accord, mais il faut s'écouter. Je pense qu'avec le nombre de litiges qui ont été... il y en a au Canada, mais surtout aux États-Unis, qu'il il y a des preuves très probantes du fait que les gens deviennent accros et c'était quelque chose que les plateformes visaient d'abord pour s'assurer que les jeunes étaient accros en toute conscience de cause. Donc, ils attendent à voir il y a comme un va-et-vient avec ces plateformes parce qu'ils nous disent qu'ils ne sont pas contre un standard à respecter, mais ils veulent de l'input sur la mise en œuvre. Donc, d'où l'importance d'une commission pour avoir un dialogue constant et dans les pires des infractions ou des amendes qui sont significatives. Mais étant donné ce qu'on voit aux États-Unis avec les litiges, avec des conséquences très importantes, ils ne sont pas surpris qu'on va imposer un standard important de réduire les méfaits auxquels sont exposés les enfants.
OK. Ils ne sont pas surpris, mais vont-ils accepter?
Mais,
mais ma vraie relance, parce qu'ils ne me laisseront pas avoir une relance.
Non, prenez le temps. Prenez le temps que vous voulez, puis je sais que vous avez droit à juste 2 questions.
Oui, c'est ça.
Après. Mais la réalité, c'est qu'ils s'attendent à quelque chose. Ils attendent aussi à regarder le contenu de la loi qu'ils viennent d'avoir sous les yeux. C'est beau de parler à des gens qui vont présenter des lois, mais il faut bien inspecter la loi puis avoir des points de vue. Mais la réaction que j'ai vue, c'était une réaction qui était soit neutre ou soit positive.
Because that was just a thank you clarification. Pour ma follow-up, je vais juste préciser 2 petits trucs qui n'étaient pas tout à fait clairs dans le briefing. Je comprends que ça va être par réglementation, mais avez-vous une idée pour les gens à la maison, les parents, de ce que ça va être les critères pour pouvoir être exemptés, pour une plateforme soit exemptée de l'interdiction de 16 ans? Qu'est-ce qu'elles vont devoir faire, les plateformes? Puis sur l'entrée en vigueur de l'interdiction, parce que pendant le briefing, on nous disait il faut attendre la réglementation, ce qui peut prendre 6 à 8 mois. La commission, elle, devrait être en fonction après 18 mois, comme vous avez dit. Est-ce qu'il y a comme un gap entre le 8 mois et le 18 mois où il y a une interdiction, mais personne ne la surveille? Comment ça marche?
D'un, c'est pas parce qu'il y a une commission qui est complètement prête qu'il ne faut pas respecter la loi. La loi rentre en vigueur du jour 1, puis les plateformes vont devoir respecter la loi. L'importance de la commission, c'est d'avoir une réglementation qui pourrait porter des précisions, qui pourrait établir des critères où les gens seraient exemptés parce qu'ils nous démontrent qu'ils sont sécuritaires par conception. Ça va être des critères plus précis que dans le libellé de la loi. Vous pouvez voir dans certaines clauses des exemples ou une précision. Mais c'est sûr que ça va prendre un certain temps. Mais de grâce, étant donné l'état actuel des choses, les gens peuvent attendre quelques mois.
Thank you. Judy Trin, CTV News.
Thank you. Minister Miller, can you clarify in regards to what you just said in terms of the timing, how this bill works? There's the possibility that that no companies will be banned. Given that you have not passed the bill, it would take, is it 18 months from royal assent before a regulator is created? Is it as soon as the bill gets royal assent, does the social media ban come in place? I think that's what my colleague was referring to. Will a social media ban take place before a regulator sets the exemptions? Or are you giving the regulator 18 months so that companies, these big tech companies, can actually catch up? So you are actually giving them the opportunity, I guess, as you say, to be safe by design as opposed to imposing a ban.
They have to, Judy, take the appropriate measures to limit kids under 16 from opening social media accounts as soon as the law comes into force. That's clear. And you can see that in the law. The exemptions is a process whereby they would have to demonstrate that they are safe by design, and that will be the process of compliance that they will enter into with the commission as it gets phased up. Is that on month 18? I would think that as the commission establishes its priorities, that would be one of the first ones, ensuring proper compliance with the law in the case of egregious breaches of it.
So as soon as this bill gets royal assent, this social media ban for kids under 16 comes in place and all big tech companies, social media companies, will have to have that age verification in place.
Yep.
Okay.
And then, sorry,
That's
and then
not
I
a
just
second
want to
We're gonna have to
clarify.
speed this up, but-
Okay,
Give her another question because I just answered it twice. So.
okay. And given the state of negotiations with the U.S., how can Canadians be confident that this bill will be prioritized, that your government will pass this bill quickly? I'm thinking of the Online Streaming Act. I'm thinking about the Digital Services Act that was pulled. How can we be confident that under U.S. pressure that this government won't fold?
There's no law that's been pulled, to be clear, but this is a law about protecting kids, and the priority is to protect kids in Canada. I think if you want to, that's not something you trade for. If you look at legislators on both sides of the political spectrum in Canada and in the U.S., I think everyone's on the same page as that.
All right, thank you. Mylène Crête, La Presse.
Bonjour, ma question est pour vous, Monsieur Miller. Je voulais savoir, avez-vous des exemples des mesures de sûreté qui seraient jugées suffisantes pour qu'un média social évite l'interdiction au moins de 16 ans? J'aimerais avoir des exemples concrets.
Écoutez, je comprends que les détails sont très importants, mais grosso modo, on pourrait en parler de cas spécifiques ad vitam aeternam. Je ne suis pas le ou la commissaire qui prendra cette décision. Il y a plusieurs critères dans la loi elle-même qui pourraient vous donner des types d'indications, des critères qui pourraient être développés pour s'assurer que les enfants sont protégés. Mais si vous regardez les 7 types de préjudices qui sont explicitement couverts par la loi, je présume, puis je m'attendrais à ce que la plateforme devrait démontrer sa capacité de réduire l'exposition aux enfants, entre autres, à ces 7 types de préjudices.
Est-ce que ça va être, par exemple, seulement d'indiquer, disons, qu'un jeune va sur une plateforme, là, un réseau social, puis il y a une boîte qui apparaît qui dit « Avez-vous moins de 16 ans? » Tu cliques « Oui » ou « Non ». Est-ce que ça va être ça ou ça va être plus...
Là, vous parlez de 2 choses. Vous parlez du processus de vérification d'âge qui va être, par sa nature, de façon probabiliste. Les plateformes vont devoir s'assurer qu'il y a une protection de l'information privée, mais admettre dans la mesure où un jeune puisse passer par-dessus cette restriction, les plateformes vont devoir encore nous démontrer en même temps qu'elles sont sécuritaires de par leur conception. C'est-à-dire, et puis vous pouvez comparer à l'expérience d'un jeune présentement en Australie, où c'est pas parfait, mais ils ont une longueur d'avance, puis selon certains 10 ans d'avance sur nous. L'expérience d'un jeune en Australie est bien meilleure que celle d'un jeune aujourd'hui au Canada. C'est ça, impossible de viser la perfection, mais on peut s'améliorer.
Okay. Mickey Jurek, Politico.
Thank you so much. I'm just kind of going to zoom out a little, maybe talk about this from a global perspective. France is pushing for a statement on online harms at the G7, which Canada is obviously helping with. But what does this bill signal to allies ahead of next week's G7 meeting, especially as major tech companies and CEOs will be sitting down with Western leaders, including the Prime Minister?
I mean, this is first and foremost, Mickey, about protecting Canadian kids. We need international leadership. I think, humbly, we are catching up. So that's an important step. The jurisdictions you're talking about, I met my colleague Laura Miller in France, who was championing President Macron's law in France through the legislative process. They're talking about a ban, but they also have the EU process that has been years ahead of us. So they are not doing the 2 things that we are doing and the catching up that we are doing. So I think it's very important for the Prime Minister to show leadership on the world stage and to support the efforts that have taken place internationally. But this is a law that stands on its own to support Canadians. And whatever may be internationally is important, but it is important that we do stand together to make sure the platforms are observing the basic elements of responsibility, protecting kids, acting responsibly, and taking down really offensive material within a reasonable period of time, and in the case of our law, 24 hours.
Thank you. And then as a follow-up, the Trump administration has repeatedly warned against foreign countries seeking to regulate U.S. tech companies. They argue that the U.S. should maintain responsibility for governing its sector. How worried are you about retaliation from the Trump administration?
I worry more about kids.
So you're not worried about
I worry
retaliation?
about kids. I worry about making sure kids are safe in this country, Mickey.
Okay. Thank you. We'll go to Dylan Robertson from Canadian Press.
Hi, thanks for taking our questions. Minister Miller, why not ban access to chatbots for kids under 16?
I mentioned that to your colleague in French. Chatbots are different than classical social media. It is very much an evolving playing field, admittedly. They play a function and a role that can be very damaging towards kids, but can also play an important function in the educational system and in the AI strategy that we are putting forward. I would say that whereas social media platforms classically have been studied for more than decades, less studied in the case of the evolution of chatbots. We're going to have to keep a close eye on it, but it did not feel appropriate to impose a minimum age restriction at this time. However, and this is the important part of this bill and the catching up that we do, we will impose the same responsibilities to protect kids first and foremost, be safe by design, act responsibly in the case of sexual materials, particularly of children, to be removed within a 24-hour period. Those duties stay, and I think that's a reasonable. It's a very basic thing to expect from a chatbot service, particularly in the wake of Tumblr Ridge.
And how will you make sure that the mechanisms that the companies are using to verify age don't violate privacy or put private information at risk?
So this is something that we were very conscious of when drafting the law. In the area of the age restriction in particular, it is a question of sometimes, yes, perfection being the enemy of the good, because there are trade-offs, particularly with respect to people's privacy, that you have if you have strict enforcement to the level of a country that Canada isn't. We put an explicit exclusion on private messaging, which is key to this law. Now, I won't say that some bullying doesn't occur as part of private messaging, but we won't be asking platforms or chatbot services to break encryption or to potentially violate Section 184 of the Criminal Code. To be honest, it's a trade-off. There are reasonable restrictions on rights in this country, but in this case, we felt the line was drawn and reasonable in this context to make sure private messaging, for example, was excluded from the ambit of the law. There are also updates to the privacy laws that are coming in the context of the of AI and a piece of legislation that hasn't been updated in decades. So that will also be will dovetail into this particular piece of legislation.
Thanks, Stephanie Taylor from National Post.
Hi, Minister. I just want to clarify, if you're saying that this ban is going to take effect once this bill receives royal assent, at what stage is your government going to be deciding which social media platforms will be covered by this ban? And do you have any idea today that you'd be willing to share with Canadians as to which social media platforms are going to be covered by this ban?
Look, certainly, yes, we do. Certainly, Meta, Facebook's, Snapchat, anything that has that. So there's a definition of what social media is in the law, and that it's pretty clear which services would be included. There'll be some borderline decisions at one point. There was a discussion on gaming, but that's quite clear in our mind what that is.
Okay, and just to clarify as well, why decide to include, porn sites in this as well? And do you have any examples of the sites that this is going to be applying to? Or is the government going to have to set a definition of what counts as a site that has enough porn on it that people shouldn't be on it or kids shouldn't be on it?
Do you want me to talk to you about my experience with porn sites? I'm not going to, I don't think I'll fall into that trap necessarily, but I think that it isn't, this isn't about, first and foremost, regulating the internet. There are certain sites that are pornographic where user content can be uploaded publicly, and it would be those that would be covered by the ambit of it. It isn't all porn sites, but principally the ones that fall into the category of social media, where users can interact and upload conduct that is then deemed offensive under the 7 broad categories that I enumerated or enumerated inside the Act.
Thank you. David Thurton from CBC.
Hi, folks. Australia has done something similar, banning kids under 16, but young people have found a way to circumvent that. What makes you think the same won't happen here in Canada?
It's an important question because it speaks to the efficacy and the efficiency of the law and our capacity to implement it and put it into force, David. At the same time, let's have some context here. We wouldn't have courts if laws were perfect and everyone observed them. That is the reality. The importance of a regulatory body is one that can create a compliance mechanism where we can work with industry and platforms to make sure that they are reducing the harm and the most egregious content that kids are being exposed to, and impose penalties in that case. The efficacy of a law depends obviously on its compliance, but we've got plenty of laws out there, unfortunately, that people don't comply with. That is why it was so key to have a commission able to interact with industry and able to give some teeth to this law so that we just didn't hope and pray that this would be enforced. And that's, I think, the reality we all have to face as we ramp up a commission within a very short 18-month time frame.
And the Tumbler Ridge shooter's communication with ChatGPT wasn't reported to police. Why didn't you order AI chatbots in this bill to report that kind of activity to the police?
We had a long policy discussion about what should be in and out of this bill. The preference was to insert a very onerous regime that would impose mandatory transparency to the public about how many incidents platforms are seeing, what their compliance mechanism is, what their reporting out requirement is. Imposing this duty to inform authorities is a different step, I believe, and not in my mind necessarily one, that isn't being done because OpenAI did have a protocol for reporting out. It just made an egregious human error. And so I'm not going to sit here and pretend today that there is one rapid solution that would have prevented what happened at Tumbler Ridge from happening. But I do think this law could have made a difference. And what that difference is something that is for others to decide. Going forward, it will certainly reduce the exposure of people to online harms, of kids in particular, but also make an onerous requirement on chatbots to interact in a way that is safe and safe by design, and to have compliance mechanisms within those chatbot services that certainly are well capitalized to tell us how they're reporting, who they're reporting to, and what they're reporting to, and essentially create an obligation to have a regime that is robust and that interacts with police and forces around the world in a responsible way.
Mari Wolf, Globe and Mail.
Thanks for taking our questions. I wondered if you could give us some insights into what kind of changes you would expect social media platforms to make in order to be exempt from a social media ban. For example, many parents have expressed concerns about the addictive qualities of social media, for example, infinite scroll, autoplay, these kind of features. Are you planning to issue a policy directions to give some pointers to the new regulator?
First and foremost, I would expect them to stop exposing kids to all that crap that we see. There are a number of criteria that are in the law that people can tease out, as I mentioned to your colleague in French, as to what that expectation would be. There will be a requirement to submit their safety plans according to the law, to work with the commissioner to make sure that their sites, if they want them exempted for kids under 16, to be, again, safe by design, including in the architecture of their platforms that may include a number of the criteria and more that you're naming, Mary. But I'm not going to presuppose the outcome of that discussion, which is an important one. But there are some very broad criteria in the law right now that could give you an idea of where that would go.
Ms. Bendayan, on Wednesday you said that the new bill would avoid many of the mistakes that other countries have made, and I presume you were talking about Australia, where apparently about 60% of under 16s have managed to remain on social media, possibly by migrating to smaller platforms like Roblox. When you're designating the number of type of social media platforms that are going to be covered by this, are you taking that into account, Mr. Miller, if you want to comment as well, so that sites such as Roblox are covered?
Thank you for the question, Marie. I think there were issues around privacy that Australia experienced and that a number of young Canadians in particular brought to light over the course of the last several months. That was taken extremely seriously by the minister and by the government when drafting the legislation, so I would point to that. You talk about certain statistics. I know that a lot of folks talk about 70% of kids in Australia are getting around the ban. When I've spoken to people in Australia, legislatures and others, they have said that there's a 2-year study that they're undertaking, and that really it would only be after that study that we would have definitive statistics. So I do think that we need to look carefully at some of the numbers being thrown around. And I also think, as the minister very eloquently said a few minutes ago, that there will be folks that will try and get around laws and regulations. I don't think everybody wears their seatbelt. Doesn't mean that a law requiring the use of a seatbelt isn't useful or important. And I think there are also changes at a societal level that we are encouraging through this piece of legislation. There are, soccer coaches that organize their matches on social media platforms, making some kids who don't want to be on social media feel obliged to join in order to participate in social events. So I think that there are a number of objectives that this legislation has and that will be accomplished.
And Maria Collins from The Wire Report.
Hi, thanks for taking our questions. Canadians have waited over 5 years for this bill. What do you say to parents who look at this and say, okay, great, we have a law in the books, but we're 2 years away almost from having any way to actually enforce it?
I'll say a couple things. I haven't heard a parent say that the way you described it. And not that that isn't a concern, because it was a very important discussion that I had directly with the Prime Minister about the timeline of getting the Commission up and going. The law applies as soon as it comes into force. But there are some mechanisms that I discussed that need to be set up as part of the Commission within a tight timeline, which is an 18-month period. That is key to making sure that it is effective. You made a point about what's gone on in the last 5 years, and there's plenty of blame to go around. I would say a number of things. That Parliament hasn't, as you mentioned, hasn't been working particularly well prior to the arrival of this new government. There were previous iterations of the law that I would submit were an overreach and tried to do too much. I don't disagree with the sentiment of protecting kids, but there were, in my mind, legitimate criticisms about inserting criminal repercussions, having a separate human rights regime all into one bill that attracted some legitimate criticism from people that would normally support this type of bill. It is important to really solve what you're trying to fix as opposed to trying to do everything at once. I think that's an important takeaway of this. We are catching up for 5 to 10 years of delay, and that is unfortunate, but we're acting now. And I think that is the important takeaway. I'd say also the atmosphere has changed and the technological environment has changed. Had we passed the bill a year ago, we probably wouldn't be having a discussion on the responsibility of AI chatbots and probably only on online harms. We might probably be talking about extreme forms of hate and bullying more than we are today about equally, if not more significant concern of making sure kids are safe in the wake of Tumbler Ridge. I came in as a minister and quite frankly, I wanted a fresh look at this. So this represents that fresh look and the feedback from people around this table, but also caucus and most importantly, parents.
And so it also says in this deck we got that, there's a duty to protect children from high-risk interactions. And so I don't understand why this isn't scoping in sort of private messaging services and gaming where we know a lot of high-risk interactions happen for children.
Absolutely, and thank you for the question. It is an important one. I would say in private messaging, there is that important aspect of not asking folks to break encryption, making sure that we are intruding into private interaction. I think philosophically, practically, there is a debate to be had as to when something becomes public or private, but we had to draw a line and also be reasonable. I'm not going to minimize the impact that certain aspects of bullying can be conveyed through mass messaging that may not be covered, but that was a decision that we had to take. The Commission will have very limited but important abilities to expand to certain platforms. That is a decision that will have to be taken by regulation and after consultation. Again, the science was pointing to this important start. And when it comes to the gaming industry, the focus of gaming is gaming, but there can be social media aspects of it. So when I talk to those companies, I kind of tell them, look to where the puck's skating and figure out what may happen if you don't regulate your platforms that are looking more social media-ish than simply gaming. But it is a different animal, and it is something we have to respect the differences on.
Thank you. I do believe we got to everybody in the room unless I missed anyone. So perhaps in the interest of time, we'll just take our last question over Zoom as we are coming close to the end of the press conference. So I'll just ask Najoud Almaliz, Bloomberg, if you still have a question, please unmute yourself. One question, one follow-up.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Not really.
We can't hear you that well, to be honest.
Okay, can you hear me now if I yell?
Jordan is shaking his head. I believe maybe you could try one more time.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that is great. Thank you, Najoud.
Okay. I was just wondering why you didn't opt for a full ban instead.
I mean, just ask her, like,
can you just repeat your question, please, Najoud? You kind of cut out just in between that.
I'm wondering why the government didn't opt for a full ban the way that Australia did.
That's an excellent question, and the answer I give you may not satisfy people that want us to completely ban this for kids. I understand the sentiment. There's part of my brain that agrees with it, but I think we know that social media can be made safe by design, that these responsibilities are important on platforms, and there are platforms for kids under 15 that can be used responsibly. There's an important role here that falls on two sets of shoulders, one of which has been overburdened heavily in the last while, which is parents. There is a role for parents here. One of the considerations was, in looking at this bill, is to consider what the federal government or the state can or should do, and what parents can or should do. We're not substituting our judgment for those of parents. And there are platforms that can be made safe, and we believe that is the case. So too with chatbots. The second element in this, which is a very important piece of the puzzle and a place like Canada, where we are a federation, is the role of the provinces. Provinces have a responsibility and a duty to make kids safe in this environment as well. That falls on their responsibility principally in the classroom. And I know a lot of governments and my colleagues that are my counterparts in provinces have reached out about bans in classrooms and regulating platforms in their way. This is stuff we'll have to do in partnership, but it is key to making sure that kids have a safer experience in this country in their online experiences, and actually get out and play. I mean, I haven't mentioned this in the press conference, and people may not think it's relevant, but we just put $750,000 into sports, so that hasn't been done in 20 years. Hopefully, this creates a space where kids have something to do outside, like I did 20 years ago.
And I'm wondering, how will you
30?
verify age? What are the methods you're looking at? A certain kind of ID? Are you going to do it through the App Store? Just wondering what you're considering there.
So there'll be a back and forth with platforms as to what protects people's privacy and what is adequate and sufficient in the circumstances. That is important. But as the Commission evolves, there will be a back and forth as to what the adequacy and sufficiency of those tools are to make sure that the law is being respected.
Okay, thank you. And with that, we will conclude our press conference. Thank you so much for doing your press conference at the National Press Theatre, and thank you for taking everybody's questions today.
Thanks. Thanks, guys.